Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joshablon, and welcome back to our series on humans. Now, today we are going to be covering hands. I have not been looking forward to this episode, and I'm also not looking forward to our episode that we're going to be doing on feet later on. But we have to get this out of the way eventually. So, hands. I know that lots of people struggle with hands, and so I've kind of broken down the hand, and we're going to be drawing just a couple kind of different shapes. They're not your typical like circle, square, those kind of shapes. They're going to be a little bit different. But it'll help us kind of simplify a little bit how to draw a hand and to understand what specific shapes are built up in the hand. So we're just going to do a straight hand kind of high five position, I suppose. We're going to be looking at it from the top and the bottom today. We might be covering other positions of hands if anyone recommends it, but I wasn't planning on doing an episode on that. So if you guys want to see that, then just comment below. So we are just going to start with the hand facing upwards. Now, we are going to start just by, I suppose just by starting to draw. Okay, so we're going to just draw our first shape. Now this shape is going to be the one that kind of starts on the wrist and it comes upwards towards where your thumb is. And so here we go. This is kind of how the shape's going to go. It's going to come up here, curve around in a nice curve, come up a little bit, and then I'm going to cut over with it. And that's going to be our first shape. Now, how I determined the shapes was how they are going to kind of fold when you close your hand. If you close your hand, you'll notice that there are specific wrinkles and lines that some of the pieces of your hand will follow. So if you just like crinkle your hand, you'll be able to see this part that I'm trying to depict here. So that's good. I'm just going to move this quickly. I want to have enough room to actually draw the full hand. Yeah, I suppose I drew it a little bit too big. Okay, so now we're just going to move on to the next piece. So the next piece is just going to be right above it. It's not going to be massive or anything. It will be following kind of this same curve that we had here, because as you noticed, it didn't quite get to finish its full arc. So that's what it's going to be doing here. We're going to just finish it with our nice arc. There we go. So that's our next part. And so just letting you know kind of where we are. There will be like wrist here, thumb is going to come out here, and then we're going to have fingers starting to pop up here. So just kind of letting you know what kind of orientation of where we are with drawing this hand. So now, just understanding, because we're going to have this part here that we're drawing, but then there's going to be an entire other section over here, kind of where the pinky is on that side. This side, in general, like the bottom, isn't going to be as big as this total side, and up towards the top, it will be bigger. So just getting some proportions out of the way. First, though, we have to finish this side that we were just working on. This curve is going to come up a little bit more, and this is going to be the kind of the last part of this side, and then this comes up. We have another line coming off of here. It's going to dip down, completing that shape, but it continues all the way across the hand, like that. So there we go. We kind of have our left side of the hand done. For the right side of the hand, it is going to be a little bit bigger further to the top, I suppose, than any of these shapes that we already have here. The bottom is going to be a little bit smaller though. So right here, where we change from this curve here to this curve here, that is going to be a point where we start drawing the next part of the hand. So comes down, our nice arc, until it meets where the wrist would come up. And once it meets that point, it'll kind of follow the kind of curve that the wrist would be following. And it will go outwards and then back in to meet this line. So there we go. Now, the very top part, we're going to have these two kind of small bulges on either side, and this is going to kind of follow where the fingers are going to be going. So that's kind of the arc that the fingers are going to follow. So yeah, there we go. We're going to have our wrist coming off down there. On this side, we're also going to have a wrist. Wherever the wrist is, the wrist bone, typically there's a little protrusion there. So if you add that, it might just add a little bit to your picture in a good way. So there we go. Now we are going to be needing to move on to the fingers. The fingers are going to be a little bit harder. They're typically quite difficult. So we're just going to start with the thumb and move our way along. So just some general things. The thumb is going to be the second smallest finger, just besides the pinky. It is a little bit longer if you do measure, unless you had part of your finger cut off or something. In most cases, it's going to be it's going to be longer. So just starting off, we're going to have this part here, and then it is kind of going to dip into this kind of concave part here. And this is going to kind of be going from the very base to kind of halfway up, where your main knuckle is inside of your thumb. Then you're going to work your way up until you finally get to the head of it. Then it follows a nice arc back down, and then kind of goes up like this. I'm going to redo a little bit of this. Sorry. There we go. That's a little bit better. Okay, so there we go. That's kind of what our thumb is going to be looking like. I think that's pretty good. We're going to be going back and erasing some lines and adding some detail a little bit later. So moving forward, we're going to be dealing with our pointer finger now. So one extra little note, when we're drawing the middle finger, it is going to be going straight up and down, and it'll follow all the way down to the elbow. It goes in a nice straight line. That's assuming that we're holding it just in a straight upright position, and there aren't any irregularities with this pose. So, getting on to drawing this. Most of the time they are going to dip in a little bit before going out for the knuckle. So, that's an important thing to note. Go up a little bit more. And then I'm going to cap it off. So there we go. There's our first finger, our pointer finger. So some people think that fingers just extend like this. They start right where the other finger ended, come back down, start again, come back down, start again. They think that's how you're going to be drawing fingers. That's not quite the case. There is going to actually be a little gap in between. Like if you hold your hand out in the position that I'm drawing, you'll notice there is a little gap in between the fingers. And so, like, we're going to start our middle finger here. We're going to end it coming back down, probably about here. Have our ring finger coming out here, and coming back down here. And then our pinky will come out here. So just plotting out where your fingers are going to be might be a useful thing. You might, and it will be useful early on so that you don't make one of the fingers way too small or one of them too big. Like I was going to make the ring finger a bit too big, judging from what I already had. And yeah, so it's quite important to plot out what you're going to be doing first. Rough sketches are always good to make before you make your final piece. There we go. So towards the top. And this finger is quite a bit taller than your pointer finger. So for different people in different hand shapes, it may depend. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Just gonna add a tiny little bit of shape up here, erase a little bit, just so that it doesn't look so thick. And there we go. Okay, so there's our middle finger, nice and done. So next comes our ring finger. Not much that different. It's pretty close to the same height as your pointer finger. It is a little bit shorter, but not too noticeable. It will be facing a little bit in the other direction though, so that's why it may seem shorter if you just hold your fingers up and measure. So yeah. And we are going to draw the tip of it there. So there. Okay, so moving on from there, we're going to just be going down and doing the pinky. Pinky isn't the hardest thing. It can be a little bit tricky though, because you don't want it to get too short, and you don't want it to get too long. Typically, if you look at the pinky and your ring finger, the ring finger is going to have those segments. Those are going to be the segments that bend. And the pinky, if you're holding it in this way, if you draw a straight line kind of out from this segment that way, the pinky, the top of it's going to meet up with that. So there we go, draw the top of our pinky there. It's going to come over it down to that knuckle. So there we go. That is rather basically how we're going to be doing our hand. So the hand may look a little bit awkward, hands normally do. We can split this into further segments just to kind of simplify how we're going to be drawing it in different positions. I'm just going to draw these few lines just to kind of show where they're going to be folding. It's kind of important to know that if you want to go in almost any other pose besides this one with your fingers. A useful thing is just putting your hand in that pose and just figuring out exactly where everything's going to be. So yeah, for here we're kind of getting both sides of it. So we'll put in kind of our fingernail that we have here, and there we go. So rather basically, that's how we're going to be drawing our hand. If you separate it into these pieces, it's rather easy to draw. Or, well, as easy as drawing hands can be, I suppose. So yeah. And yeah, these shapes are going to be different when you're looking at it from the top, though. And by that I mean your knuckles facing you. It is going to look quite different. So, just moving on, we're going to make a new layer, get rid of that for now. And we are going to be doing it from the top now, because it is a little bit different. Okay, so just starting off, we're going to first kind of draw where our wrist is going to be, and a little bit off of there. So here's just kind of our wrist. This is going to be the thumb side this time. And then on the other side, we'll kind of have a bulge in the wrist and coming down. Yeah. All right. So this is going to be our pinky side. It's going to follow just a nice little arc, just like that. This arc will slowly come in, become concave, and then it'll start working its way out again as it starts to go up towards the pinky. We can draw an arc representing where the rest of the fingers are going to be starting. I'm not going to draw that right now, just because it might be a bit wrong depending on specific placement. We don't have enough of the hand drawn to be able to draw a proper arc. So we're just going to draw this part. This is going to be the first part of the thumb. There's kind of our knuckle. It'll come up, second knuckle in the thumb, and then kind of our top of the thumb again. So there we go. and it comes into the hand. So there we go. So that is our thumb. Again, we can segment this into kind of shapes, so I'm just going to do that here. There we go. There's going to be our thumb piece. So that's just a little bit of it. I did leave out one part, and that part is just going to be a little extra bit of kind of muscle or fat that comes down kind of here. Like if you put your hand flat on a table, you'll be able to see the part that I'm talking about. It's an awkward little piece. So moving forward, we are going to be drawing kind of a muscle that's around this area. This is going to be a muscle that is in between kind of where the thumb starts and where your pointer finger starts. So we're just going to quickly draw the bounds of that. And it's going to be around here. You want to know this because for specific shading purposes, you want to make sure that you have that done right. And then we're going to have another little bulge kind of part here. So there we go. And this is going to be where our index finger is going to start. So now you can draw your arc properly. And there we go. So that's kind of where all of our fingers are going to be starting. This part that I drew down here, that kind of muscle or fat part, that is also on the other side. But we already drew it in with the arc because it actually goes along with the arc that we already drew quite nicely. So that's just going to be kind of that part right there. Okay, so moving forward, I'm just going to move the picture down a little bit so that I have room to draw, and we'll get right into it. Okay, so starting with our pointer finger, we're going to have it kind of bend in as we had it before, and then bend out wherever we have a knuckle. This sometimes isn't going to be happening with the top knuckle, or not as boldly. It won't be as evident. There we go. Let it bend out again and come back down. And yeah, depending on how like the musculature of your figure or the specific fat content on your figure, it may, like the knuckle may or may not seem a little bit more or less bony. So keep that in mind. Yeah. Okay. So here's where there's a little bit of a difference between looking from the top and from the bottom. There is going to be a little bit of skin in here, kind of in these weird little triangular pockets, where, and then there's going to be our typical gap here that we see. This entire part is going to be on a lower surface, and so we're going to be wanting to shade that a little bit more. I'm not going to be adding that right now. We're going to just add that a little bit later, but just thought I'd mention that. It's quite important that we add that eventually. Okay. So I'm going to just figure out the finger placement again, just to make sure that I'm not making one too big or too small. We're going to have our pinky extending that way. Ring finger here. It'll go to here. And then we will have our middle finger going up. So that thing's all nicely plotted out. Going up. Knuckle for the middle finger is going to be a little bit higher than the knuckle for the pointer finger. There we go. Slight bulge for the second knuckle. Then we'll come down. And there we go. There's going to be our middle finger. Next finger. This knuckle's lower than the one on the middle finger. And it comes out to there. Alright, perfect. Moving on to the pinky. Pinky, again, is going to be a little bit shorter than the thumb. Not that we're using the thumb as a reference or anything, but always a good little thing to know. pinky knuckle there, another knuckle here, and then we'll have it come back down and in. So there we go. Oh, I think I maybe made that pinky a bit too big. Sorry. There we go. Okay. So I think that was pretty good. And so now we need to add all those little kind of triangular places in between the fingers. Kind of looks like an upside down Star Trek symbol if you think about it. But yeah. So that's just going to be important because it's going to be on a lower plane, so you're going to be needing to shade in between there a little bit more. And that does happen in between each and every one of the gaps in between the fingers. So yeah. I'm just going to fix this little bit here, because you could tell the middle finger and the gap between the middle finger and the pointer finger was way too big. So I'm just going to redo this kind of bottom part. It's not a bad thing if you see a little mistake in your art, and so you go back and quickly fix it. It's not a bad thing. It's better to fix it now than to fix it later, because it just gets harder and harder to fix as you go further and further down the rabbit hole. Okay. I'm going to kind of add those weird wrinkles that you're going to have on your fingers where they bend with the knuckle. And we're going to add some fingernails. A good thing to keep in mind, just kind of with drawing in general, you don't want to give up. Like, don't give up too early. Sometimes when I'm drawing or doing something, or even one of these, I feel a bit discouraged because it doesn't look like it's coming along well. But typically, when you stick to it and you keep adding more detail to it, you'll be able to tell that it just keeps looking better and better. Sometimes it doesn't look great in the early phases, but then as you keep going, just adding those tiny little details, it looks just better and better. So don't quit, even if it looks a little bit awkward at the beginning. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to change the knuckle to be there. Okay, and so that's kind of our hand looking down on it. So now we're going to be dealing with kind of knuckles and what we're going to be doing with that. So there is a knuckle here, and it's going to be quite prominent compared to the other ones, so it'll be there. Knuckles are kind of in a diamond-like shape. Especially this one. If you're making a fist or something, they will kind of follow that. The edges are going to be more curved though. But typically when you draw the others, they're just going to kind of be these points that are coming down. So as you can see, that's making it look quite a bit more like a hand. And there will be kind of one place where all the tendons from those will meet, and it'll kind of be down here somewhere. And so if we drew where the tendons are going to come from, they'd all come down and meet in here. They don't need to meet in the same spot, but just mentioning that that is kind of how the tendons in your hands work. And so depending if your figure is bony, that may be an important thing to factor in. What you may want to do is you may want to kind of add veins, because some people have rather veiny hands, and so just by going in, maybe adding a few veins that are coming through the hand, it may make it look quite a bit more realistic. Like, as you can see, it's already starting to add a little bit to this hand. You probably wouldn't go and outline the whole thing, you'd probably just add a tiny little bit of shading, but we're just doing a quick sketch of it. So yeah, there you go, that's just a quick little thing. And yeah, so you can't really separate the, looking down at the top of the hand, you can't really separate it into as many shapes as you can with the bottom of the hand, unfortunately. But yeah. So we're going to go back and keep working with this part of the hand, just to kind of make it look a little bit more natural. So I'm going to go in with an eraser, and we're going to kind of get rid of these lines. Not all the way though, because these are actual kind of crinkles that you can actually see on your hand. so it's important not to get rid of them completely, but making them a bit less bold would be good. So I'm just going to quickly do a couple of those. And yeah, I'm going to get rid of them in between each finger because they're not actually really there, or not there as much. And so there you go. That's basically how our hand's going to be from there. You can add in shading where you want it. Like there's probably going to be a bit of shading, well, assuming that the light's coming from this direction, we'd probably have like shading on this side, we'd have shading over here, shading over here. You'd probably want it to follow the curvature, so a little bit more like this, concave before going to the knuckle, where it comes out a little bit and there's a little bit less on that side and coming back for the bottom of it. So you may want to be doing some shading like that. This side of the hand you may be wanting a bit, make sure that it keeps following the curvature of the hand. You may want just a little bit, like maybe on the edges of some of these lines. It's really just personal preference for the most part, so that's an important thing to note. But yeah, there is going to be quite a lot of shading kind of in this area of the hand because it's going to be kind of the base of the hand. So there will be shading there, and it will affect kind of the shading on the wrist as well. Same thing on the other side. There's going to be shading kind of all along here. It will affect the bottom. So yeah, it's quite important to note. So yeah, that is how we are going to be dealing with that part of the hand, and I think that it looks pretty good. So moving on, we're just going to finish up our kind of top of the hand part that we've done. So I'm going to go in, kind of erase some of the lines that we've done. Oh, oops, there we go. Now I can do that. So unlike in the other one, these lines aren't actually going to be there. So the lines that we've made, kind of to simplify it as much as we can, they aren't actually going to be featured on your actual hand. All right. So moving on, we're going to probably have a little bit of shading on this part, assuming that the lighting again is coming in from that direction. We would have shading kind of in this area, probably the entire area, just because the rest of the hand is kind of on a raised plane compared to it. So it would seem like it's a little bit more in the back. It might be the same on this part here, depending on where your lighting is coming from. I don't think I'm going to add this in this particular part, but I will erase that line just to make sure it's not there anymore. We'll get rid of this line there, and then there's our muscle here. So just remember where that line is. I'm just going to quickly erase it for now, and then I'll go in, and we're just going to add just a tiny bit of shading kind of around that area on the lower side, just because that will be protruding a little bit, so it's important to kind of get where that muscle is. And yeah, we'll have a little bit of the wrist kind of overlapping on this part, and there we go. Now you just going to add a little bit of shading in these pockets, because I did mention earlier they are on a lower plane, so it is important to put shading in them. You can do the same thing with the other side of the hand and kind of add shading on this side and have it concave in those parts, and leave a little bit less for the knuckle areas and have it just come in a little bit more on the others. You can do that on your own. I don't think I need to explain that. You can add more veins if you want. You can add just a little bit of kind of shading where your tendons are going to be if you want. It will just keep adding more to your picture. Typically with a sketch like this, I wouldn't do that. So yeah. So there we go. There's kind of how you're going to be doing hands. So if you have any questions, just ask in the comments below. If you have any more ideas of tutorials that you want to see, just comment below again. If you like this video, then leave a like, and if you want to see more of these kind of videos, then subscribe. And yeah, that's how you do hands. So thank you everybody so much for watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial.